I don't know. I got caught. I was ready to do a million different things. I plan on getting in a fist fight tonight, not being done in 15 seconds, you know.
Since its first ever event in 1993, the UFC has featured hundreds of title fights between some of the best fighters on the planet. While some title fights have delivered back and forth wars over the span of 25 minutes, there are others that didn't even make it out the first round. Whether it be due to a flash knockout or a quick submission, the UFC has seen several occasions where a championship fight has ended quicker than expected. So for this video, we'll be taking a look at some of the shortest and most shocking title performances in UFC history. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at 10 of the fastest finishes in title fight history. Number 10. Zhang Weili vs Jessica Andrade. After losing to Joanna Jędrzejczyk in 2017, UFC strawweight Jessica Andrade put together one of the best winning streaks in her division. She won 4 fights in a row, which included a knockout win over Rose Namajunas, as she laid claim to the strawweight crown. During that same period, rising talent Zhang Weili had quietly made a name for herself as one of the division's top contenders. In the span of 5 years, she had won 19 straight fights, which earned her a title shot against Jessica Andrade at UFC Fight Night 157. Although Andrade came into the fight a sizable favourite, things did not end well for her at all. Once the fight got underway, the two immediately began trading some hard shots, before Weili caught Andrade with a clean right hand and had her in serious danger. From there, Weili poured the pressure on, landing a series of elbows and knees into the midsection of Andrade, forcing her to collapse to the ground. After a few follow-up shots, the referee stepped in to stop the match just 42 seconds in. It was a brilliant performance that saw Weili become the first ever UFC Chinese champion. Number 9. Ronda Rousey vs Bethe Correia. By the time bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey was set to face Bethe Correia at UFC 190, she had already steamrolled her way through the majority of her division. She was riding an 11-fight unbeaten streak, with all of her wins ending by way of knockout or submission. Meanwhile, the challenger Bethe Correia had won 9 fights in a row, with 3 of those victories coming inside the UFC. While she certainly didn't lack any confidence during the pre-fight build-up, she was hopelessly outmatched in terms of skill and experience. And a controversial comment about the suicide of Ronda's father, well, it probably didn't do her any favours, only making Ronda more eager to win. Though the fight took place in Correia's home country of Brazil, the crowd seemed to rally behind the champion Ronda Rousey. After a heated stare-down, the two began throwing a wild exchange of punches. Despite landing a couple of decent shots, Bethe soon found herself completely overwhelmed. A vicious flurry from Ronda Rousey quickly sent Correia stumbling towards the edge of the cage. What followed was a solid right hand that sent Correia falling face down to the canvas. 34 seconds in and she was out cold, and Ronda was declared the winner. Number 8. Henry Cejudo vs TJ Dillashaw. Following his victory over Demetrius Johnson, flyweight champion Henry Cejudo's first order of business was to defend his title against bantamweight king TJ Dillashaw. The two were set to headline the first ever event on ESPN in a champion versus champion super fight, with Dillashaw looking to put an end to the flyweight division. Though many were left doubtful that Dillashaw would be able to successfully cut down to 125 pounds, he surprisingly made weight. Of course, we later learned out that this was largely due to a banned substance called EPO. Despite being a 2-to-1 underdog, it was Cejudo who emerged victorious in the end. About 20 seconds into the fight, the former Olympic gold medalist connected with an overhand right that sent Dillashaw tumbling to the canvas. While Dillashaw did his best to scramble out of trouble, Cejudo gave him no room to breathe, unloading a vicious flurry of punches until the referee waved it off. 32 seconds was all it took for Cejudo to put a stop to Dillashaw, in turn earning him one of the fastest finishes in title fight history. Number 7. Tito Ortiz vs Evan Tanner. UFC 30, Battle on the Boardwalk, marked a major turning point for the UFC. At the time, it was the first UFC event that was held under the ownership of Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta. Hoping to make a good first impression, they decided to throw in UFC poster boy Tito Ortiz to headline the event, defending his title against future champion Evan Tanner. During that period, light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz was easily the UFC's biggest star, so it only made sense that the UFC was hoping to capitalise on some of his star power. Once UFC 30 came about, Ortiz put on perhaps the most impressive finish of his entire career. Less than half a minute into round 1, Ortiz secured a bodylock onto Evan Tanner and proceeded to slam him onto the ground. Tanner's head hit the mat with so much force that he was immediately knocked out, and the match was called off just 30 seconds in, awarding victory to Tito Ortiz in his second title defense. Number 6. Frank Shamrock vs Igor ZINOVIEV. As if his win over Kevin Jackson at UFC 15.5 wasn't impressive enough, Frank Shamrock somehow managed to follow that up when he faced his next opponent in 1998. Following a record-breaking victory over Kevin Jackson, UFC 16 saw Frank Shamrock attempt to make his first title defense against UFC newcomer Igor ZINOVIEV. Though Igor was being hailed as the biggest test of his career, Shamrock essentially ran through him in devastating fashion. As soon as the fight began, Frank quickly shot in for a takedown on Igor. Once he had a hold of Igor's legs, he hoisted the Russian into the air and then slammed him onto the mat to knock him out unconscious. The slam was so hard that it actually broke Igor's collarbone and fractured his vertebrae, causing him to retire immediately after. In total, the fight only lasted 22 seconds and earned Frank Shamrock his first title defense. Number 5. Ronda Rousey vs Alexis Davis. In 2014, Ronda Rousey was set to make her fourth title defense against Alexis Davis in the co-main event of UFC 175. Though Alexis wasn't the number one contender at the time, her 5-fight winning streak was enough to sell the idea that she was a worthy opponent. That being said, Ronda Rousey was widely hailed as the UFC's most dangerous woman. She was also no stranger to short fights, with all but one of her wins coming inside the first round. So, naturally, few were giving Davis a real chance of dethroning Ronda Rousey. While Rousey had earned a reputation of finishing opponents by submission, this was one of the rare occasions where she relied on her striking to finish the job. Once the fight got underway, Rousey immediately connected with a solid right hand before delivering a hard knee to the midsection of Davis. From there, Rousey grabbed a hold of Davis and tossed her to the ground, before trapping her into a headlock and following up with several headshots to close the show. In the end, 16 seconds was all that was needed for Rousey to completely dismantle Davis, earning her one of the quickest victories of her career. Number 4. Frank Shamrock vs Kevin Jackson. UFC 15.5 was a notable event for several reasons. It marked the first appearance of former UFC commentator Mike Goldberg, and was the first event held outside of the United States. It also featured the first ever light heavyweight championship bout, as Frank Shamrock and Olympic gold medalist Kevin Jackson took each other on. Though Jackson actually had more experience as a UFC fighter, Shamrock held more MMA experience overall, with an extensive career in other promotions. The opening seconds of the fight saw Kevin Jackson charge in and secure an immediate takedown on Frank Shamrock. But before Jackson could even figure out his next move, Shamrock had already locked in a lightning fast armbar, forcing Jackson to tap out. The submission win was clocked in at 16 seconds, earning Frank Shamrock the inaugural light heavyweight championship. Number 3. ANDREI ARLOVSKI vs Paul BUENTELLO. When it was first announced that heavyweight champion ANDREI ARLOVSKI would be defending his title against Paul BUENTELLO, most expected the two to deliver an epic battle on the feet. What wasn't expected, however, was for Arlovsky to dive in for a takedown, only for Paul to be rendered completely unconscious moments later. Just a few seconds into the match, Paul found himself falling face down to the mat after Arlovsky had seemingly attempted a double leg takedown. Moments later, ANDREI was declared the winner by knockout just 15 seconds into the fight, leaving the audience both frustrated and confused. At first glance, it looked as if Paul had suddenly collapsed for virtually no reason. But after the replay showed Arlovsky landing a clean right hand to the chin of Paul before shooting him for the takedown, fans soon realised exactly what had happened. To this day, it remains one of the best time counters in UFC history. Number 2. Ronda Rousey vs Kat Zingano. After defeating Alexis Davis in a record-breaking 16 seconds, Ronda Rousey saw herself paired off with number 1 contender Kat Zingano at UFC 184. What made this matchup so intriguing was the fact that both women were undefeated heading into the fight. While Ronda was riding a 10-fight winning streak with 4 successful title defenses, Kat was 9-0 and was coming off of consecutive knockouts over Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes. Though Zingano was touted as Ronda Rousey's toughest challenge to date, the outcome proved that their skill gap was far larger than people realised. While Kat was known for being a slow starter, she instead came sprinting out of her corner and charged at Ronda Rousey. Soon enough, a scramble ensued and Ronda Rousey cartwheeled her way into a dominant position. From there, she transitioned right into her signature armbar, forcing Zingano to tap just a few moments later. Not only had Ronda won the fight in a mere 14 seconds, but she had also done so against someone who many felt would be the one to dethrone her. Number 1. Conor McGregor vs Jose Aldo. At the time it was made, Conor McGregor vs Jose Aldo was one of the most anticipated title matches in promotional history. Despite their original fight being scheduled for UFC 189, it was eventually pushed back to UFC 194 after Aldo sustained a rib injury in training. During that time, Conor had won the interim featherweight title against Chad Mendes and was looking to unify that belt with Aldo's. Over a year of trash talk and promotional build-up, the event had become a must-see for MMA fans around the world. While many had their own opinions about how the fight would play out, no one could have predicted the actual outcome, except perhaps Conor McGregor himself. While McGregor entered the contest looking relaxed and confident, Aldo appeared visibly tense and nervous. This was likely due to the toll that the verbal warfare had taken on Aldo. As soon as the fight began, both McGregor and Aldo rushed to the centre of the cage. After a few feints were thrown, Aldo finally threw a strike that was met with a counter left hand from McGregor. The picture-perfect shot immediately dropped Aldo to the ground, where the Brazilian was lying completely cold. In a matter of just 13 seconds, McGregor had become the featherweight champion and set the record for the fastest championship performance in UFC history. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and we'll see you on the next video.